This episode of The Jason Wright Show is brought to you by Authentic Health. If you've been listening for a while, you know Jason is passionate about living better, longer, and stronger. And Authentic Health is a key part of that mission. Their foundational supplement stack is designed to support your body at the cellular level, protect against toxins, and give you the fuel you need to perform at your best, whether that's in the gym, at work, or just in everyday life. And because you're a listener of The Jason Wright Show, you can get an exclusive discount. Just visit shopauthentichealth.com and use the promo code JASON at checkout. Take ownership of your health and join me in building a stronger, healthier future with Authentic Health.
All right, Dan Powers, man. Welcome to the, I'm going to put this on the Healthy CEO as well as the Jason Wright Show. So welcome to both shows all at once, man. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How you doing, Jason?
I am fantastic, and I'm really glad to have you on today to talk about Utzy, which is your company. But before we even get into that, man, and now look, when you're in the nutraceutical space, the biohacking space, Ortho Molecular means something to guys like me. I mean, you guys, your family business that is part of your DNA to where you are now as an entrepreneur, man, I'm talking about best in class. It is anyone that you talk to about Ortho to, they know it is the premier business with regard to nutraceuticals, ergo supplements, that sort of thing. So tell us how I don't want to make this about your family's business. We're here to talk about you and Utzy, but I can't not mention this almost like royal pedigree you have in the supplement space so it just wouldn't be fair to the audience. So tell us kind of like from Ortho to Utzy, how your journey in health and wellness began, man.
100%. Yeah. And, I mean, that your background is your background, right? And so that's what you know. And that's the story that kind of starts it all. So yeah, so my dad, Gary Powers, founded Ortho Molecular. I want to say 1989, something like that. So right around 35, 40 years ago. And he'd been in the supplement industry for years before that, working with his uncle, who was an old supplement dog back in like the 60s and 70s, early days of the supplement industry. So that was kind of his background. He was running factories at age 19 for his uncle. And he actually, his father, my grandpa, had passed away when he was 13 years old and from a cardiovascular event. And so health was kind of always something for him that he was just concerned with, wanting to take care of himself and just kind of looking at some genetic factors that were in play there, and also lifestyle as well. So that was kind of his story, is starting Ortho and building a team and really a machine that could just create excellent products that could manufacture and deliver them to physicians all throughout the US. And so that's what was my, growing up, is we would have people, researchers around the dinner table. They'd come to dinner, they'd be in town, doing a visit to the factory. They'd come over for dinner, and that was the topic of discussion. I was just thinking the other day, like Jordan Rubin was someone that we knew back in the day that, pretty sure you're over for dinner and talking about gut health or celiac, in 2001 or something like that, like earlier days for all this type of stuff. So that was always the discussion. Those were the books I was reading as a teenager, was the latest kind of health books or business self-help as well. And that's kind of what I was steeped in growing up. I was also homeschooled too. So we're a pretty big family. There's 10 of us kids, all kind of homeschooled, out in raised in the country, and kind of clean living, I would say. But so that was kind of the background. And then fast forward, I finished college. I was 20, 21 years old. And then it was kind of like, okay, what do I want to do? And Dad and I started talking, and we're like, well, it would be interesting to launch a new company in more of the direct consumer model. Whereas Ortho is very B2B, they sell to physicians throughout the US, right? And with Utzy, that's the company we started, Utzy Naturals, was how can we create something that all our friends and family like, hey, how do we get your products? And we're like, well, unless your physician sells it to you in office, it's not really available. It's very much a gated brand. And that's to protect the physician. So we started kind of noodling on the idea of starting something new that would be separate formulations, separate products, but made to the same standard as typical ortho products. So that was kind of the idea behind Utzy. And then there's a whole process behind even naming it. My great grandma, her name was Ursula. She was from Germany, a German immigrant, and her nickname was Utzy. So that's like we're very much just kind of steeped in family lore with this brand.
Well, with the family heritage like you've got, man, that's quite pretty understandable. All right, so here's what I want to know, and we could go all into the whole ortho business model that is mostly B2B through the physicians, and that's why most of the people on this office, or excuse me, in this podcast or listen to this podcast, they probably never heard of Ortho Molecular. They've heard of Thorne. They've
Yep.
heard of Keon. I would say consumer facing Thorne probably the closest as far as like higher quality.
Yeah.
But you guys, you were only selling through physicians' offices, so I got to think, man, how cool it was that back in the day that your dad was finding physicians that were open to supplementation and nutraceuticals. Tell me some of the misconceptions that from watching that the evolution of your family business, even through the creation of Utzy, the misconception people have with supplementation. There's always, it's kind of a controversial deal. A lot of people still hold on to the belief, supplements are just expensive pee. That's all it is. It's like, and which obviously, being in the nutraceutical space myself, I don't believe that. And having worked with and have a business partner that is a physician that has actually had Ortho Molecular products in his office, I see it from a much different picture. But kind of tell some of the folks what the misconceptions are around the nutraceutical space.
Yeah. The way I look at it, and especially from kind of an ortho molecular background, is a lot of the stuff you see in retail or on shelf is just a different caliber, different grade of product, I would say, than what you see in a physician's office. And so when a physician's recommending a product, a functional doctor, they're doing a specific protocol to have an impact. And that the health of that patient and the reputation of the doctors at stake when they do that versus taking something else. And so that product has to work. So that's always been our background, is really being nutraceutical and precise and targeted with how we build products. And, when you get more into kind of the retail space, the quality just degrades at a pretty rapid pace. And so I can understand consumer sentiment when they talk about how, products are not working for them or it's just expensive pee. And a lot of it just has to do with the quality of the actual product and the intention and care behind ingredient selection and formulation. So that's kind of one of the big things, is just not all things are equal in the supplement industry, but I can also understand from a consumer perspective, it's very difficult to try and understand the nuances of all those different types of things. And um, even a month or two ago, I was listening to a podcast with a really excellent operator in the supplement space. He had more of kind of a VC background, but he was bragging about some basic testing that they were doing for their brand. Like it was some revolutionary thing. And I was like, "You've been doing that for 20 years, buddy. Like you're
Yeah.
bragging about this on a podcast that you're doing basic testing. Like that's wild to me." But yeah, there's just differences within brands that are out there. And the ingredient selection, the formulation, all those different aspects.
Well, I think that's one of the things that why I'm so excited that, just so the audience knows, this is Dan's first podcast to do, which is kind of shocking because you have such an amazing story to tell. And it's one of the things that's really hard whenever, like a great example, I was at a wedding here recently and I'm sitting down beside a lady who's a cancer survivor.
Cool.
And she's told me, and she's completely and she's in remission, and she's completely cleaned up her diet and her environment and everything to try to support good health. And so I asked her about supplementation. I said, are you doing anything? She said, no. She said, I went to one doctor and he put me on all these different supplements. She said, no, I'm just eating right and eating clean. And I wanted to go into, I didn't want to sell her there at the wedding. That's what it always feels like you're doing when you start to tell people that, yeah, but you got to understand, my product is better. A lot of folks don't understand that Supplements, yes, a lot of the companies have earned their bad reputation. That they've earned, it's well earned,
Mhm.
but there is a different degree with what you're doing. There are doctors out there with products in their offices. Again, I mentioned Gus Vickery. It's a huge part of Gus's patient protocol is come in, do blood work, look at your cellular health, and then start looking at environment, nutrition, and part of that's going to be nutraceuticals and that's kind of the part of the precision and precision medicine, right? Is precisely getting you those nutrients you need. Whenever you guys are sourcing for the ingredients for the molecules that you're going to put into your products, what makes it quality versus not quality? How are you able to weave through that minefield to make sure you get the highest quality ingredients in the products that you're selling?
Yeah, I mean, so a big piece of how we look at for Utzy and both Ortho is we like to work with ingredient suppliers that have clinical studies on their actual ingredients. So you can buy a generic of anything. You can buy ashwagandha, that's just a whole powder or an extraction or what have you. Um, but really, the best suppliers are doing their own clinical research to show impact of how their product works for various different things. And so we typically like to use a filtering mechanism of, do they have clinical research showing the benefit of this material? And then if yes, let's talk to their scientific team and kind of dig into what are the mechanisms, what type of studies are you doing, how does it all work together? Um, and then so that's kind of like on the front end is what's the clinical side look like? And then once we actually get product in house, we'll get samples. Then that starts a battery of tests that we run stuff through. And really, like, it's kind of like it has to prove innocence, right? It's guilty until proven innocent through 10, 15 different testing protocols to make sure it's pure, safe, potent, etc. So that's kind of how we run our process. And a lot of other companies will just be like, well, we're looking for a price point. What can you build for me that hits this MSRP, bottle type of thing? And so that's just, I think that's backwards. I think you have to look at what are the ingredients, what are you looking to do, and then use that to now build into your formula.
So, whenever you decided to start Utzy, how did you decide the first product line? Because and what was it? I mean, like right now, I think you hear all the stories now. Right now, creatine is the belle of the ball, which is, and again, I think that you'll find this humorous. I'm going to ask you because I know my take. I don't want to cloud this, but I see a lot because creatine is getting so talked about. Now all of a sudden you're seeing more and more creatine companies, and you'll have people say, but my creatine is like the best creatine. So whenever you see a claim like my creatine gummy or my creatine is the best creatine, as someone who has literally grown up in the business, what do you say to that, Dan?
Well, creatine's interesting. I am a total meathead, so I've been taking creatine for years, and I've actually been bumping up my doses based off of some interesting research that's been coming out. So the standard is always 5 grams, and back when I was a teenager, they're like, "You gotta spike your insulin when you take it." So I would buy little grape juice bottles and suck that
I
down, take my creatine, and, I thought I was crushing it at 18 years old, um, but yeah, anyways, nowadays, I do 10 grams. They've shown some interesting benefits for both brain health and really just for muscle health and muscle building. So I'm always in the gym, and so that's a huge part of kind of what I do, but yeah, with creatine, that's an interesting one where they will, creatine monohydrate is kind of the tried and true standard there. And there's really not a lot of complexity that you can do with it. It's just kind of like a pretty simple molecule. And you'll see different products that come out that like, hey, we're gonna attach X, Y, and Z, ring to it or whatever, and do this triterpene, whatever. Actually, probably not a terpene, but they'll add all these different types of things, and I haven't seen anything that's been convincing. That one is just creatine monohydrate, tried and true. Now there is a, supplier from, Germany called, Creapure that I really do like. I believe most of the creatine is made in China, which typically has more of a red flag attached with it. But there is one supplier in Germany. Again, look for the brand name Creapure on the label. They do a great job. It's pharmaceutical grade, so that's typically what I buy. But yeah, that's one of the ones where all the fancy stuff isn't doing much for you. It's just kind of the old school basics on that one.
Okay, see that good. You confirmed what I you teased out. I teased out exactly what I wanted because a lot of people they'll get caught up in this like creatine being the big one right now, where there's some sort of superpower, supercharged creatine. No, creatine's creatine. It's just like get it from a reputable company at the best value you can get it. And it's funny, I had forgotten about that. I was the same way back in the day. I used to put my creatine, like mix it in some sort of a like a cranberry juice or something like that because of you need the insulin spike to I'd forgotten all about that. And and that's one of my staples now is 5 grams, and I did bump it up to 10 for a little bit.
Okay.
Man, I tell you what, it really does the water retention in your muscles. It made me kind of, is probably just mental as much as anything, but I was kind of bulking and I was retaining a little bit of water. So I'm kind of going back and forth from 5 grams to 10 grams. I think Andrew Huberman's the first person I heard that cited a study about the cognitive benefits of going ahead and upping it to 10 versus 5 grams. So I'm kind of bobbing back
And
and forth on that.
just to out on that for a second, there's been some studies showing up to 30 grams a day, 30 plus
Yeah, it's
grams a
crazy.
day, and just for
Wow.
brain health. And so, again, but that seems to be more of a short term. It's not like it's going to boost your cognition. It more kind of protects your cognition.
Yeah.
So interesting research. I've not tried 30 grams. I do not like the gritty texture of creatine, so I would not want to take a protein, size scoop of it. That does not
Yeah.
sound very enjoyable.
Well, and just also to the listener out there. So I have my parents are always asking me after they have bought something that was advertised to them on Fox News or something, then they ask me, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, it would have been easier if you would have asked me before you bought it, but because I don't want to hurt your feelings until you just bought, something that you could have just eaten more of this. But it's one of those things that to the listener out there, and you just kind of confirmed it, Dan. There is little to no downside being reported on creatine. It's a value. It does have. It's not just kind of a. I had Dr. Jose Antonio on here. Gosh, it's been a couple of years ago. Who's kind of like the creatine researcher guru. I mean, of
Nice.
an OG. The dude's been studying it for years. And we talked about how it used to be kind of like the bro thing. You took creatine to get jacked. Now it is almost universally recommended for cognitive health as well as support for bone health, lean body mass. And so to the listener, it is one of the cheapest, most little downside, if any, that you can get. So I'm glad we covered that a little bit. Now I'll go back because I'm a terrible interview at times like this because I'll chase rabbits. Get back to when you decided to start Utzy and get your first lineup. What was the first lineup? And talk to me. I know we'll probably talk about some botanicals and stuff, which I know nothing about. So how did you decide what you were going to put in more of a consumer facing model versus the physician model that you had at Ortho?
Yeah. So our initial foray was it wasn't as much me on the formulation side because at that point I was like 22, 23 maybe. So it was very much dad and I working together. And the kind of his initial thought process was very much mineral and vitamin based of covering the basics. And so his kind of concept is like we're made from the dust, right? When God breathed life into dust, that's when we were created, Genesis. And so with that, he's like, we're from the dust. We need minerals, right? And so bioavailable minerals was kind of a key thing that we really like to focus on. So we built a really comprehensive multivitamin. We call it a multi-nutrient actually, because it's not just a vitamin, called Essentially You. And so that was kind of our first product in that regard. So really looking at chelated minerals, which are essentially you take a mineral and you bind it to a protein or an amino acid. And what that does is that protects that mineral as it goes through your digestive tract and it leads to better absorption. Um, so some of the cheaper mineral types, well, essentially, you're not going to get much out of them. So we have a supplier in Utah called Albion that we really love. They're kind of the leaders in chelated minerals. So that was kind of one of our key products was Essentially You. Um, And then from there, we really kind of built out a product line where we're like, what are kind of the key nutrients that people are missing in their diets, and let's kind of focus on that. So, um, with that was a fiber product. So most Americans tend to be deficient in fiber. So building out that a product that would span the gap. So we all tend to be about 8 to 9 grams short in fiber. So we built out fiber, and then from there we would kind of focus on different product lineups as they came of interest and kind of wherever the research led us. So we did a couple of sleep products. And then we started looking at cardiovascular health, and we built out some different products there. So looking at cholesterol in different areas there, blood sugar balance. So we built out a slew of products there, and then one of our kind of our OG products, if people know ortho, is D-Hist for seasonal allergies, and so we built out a different formulation for Utzy called Allergica, and so that is a special near and dear product to my heart because it uses organic stinging nettle. So stinging nettle has a mast cell stabilizing effect. Um, and the stinging nettle that we use is something that's grown on our company farm. So kind of alongside the launch of Utzy as a brand, we started building out an organic herb farm. So I actually live on the farm, kind of connected to the property there. We've got a couple hundred acres of organic farmland. And so my brother actually has grass-fed cattle grazing on one side, and then we've got about 10 to 15 acres where we're starting to actively grow herbs. And the first herb that we grew that went into our product line is actually stinging nettle in Allergica. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of one of our kind of fun things that we've been working on, and it's crazy how difficult it is to take something from like seed to capsule. Like the entire supply chain is incredibly difficult, especially with ortho as far as like how we process everything there. So
Dan, that must really suck. You growing up on a, organic farm, your dad, you're in this, I mean, you're just surrounded by health and wellness at every level. I
Well,
feel for you,
Jason,
brother.
well, let me add something on that. And that's been so I'd say we've kind of in the last I would say 3 to 6 months really had a pivot with how we see the business and where we see ways to help people. And so right. So raised in this organic farm, like beautiful Wisconsin countryside, rolling hills. My wife and I have been married for 8 years. We have 5 daughters, all
Congratulations.
little under the age of 7, so real tightly
Wow.
packed. And we're in this beautiful pastoral setting. It's like the optimal setup, and we have been running into all sorts of health issues with our daughters, despite being in this really optimal setup. It's not like we're in the middle of a city, fighting
Yeah.
for our lives with the smog or something. And that's been something that has really got me fired up because no matter how well you're eating organic foods, living in the country, getting sunshine, grounding, like all those different types of things, we're still exposed to these different environmental toxins. So you might have organic oats, but they could still be getting sprayed with glyphosate because the field over is full of glyphosate. Or in us where we live, um, we're a big corn growing area in Wisconsin, in southeast Wisconsin, and so a lot of the Roundup, right, that gets sprayed on those
Mhm.
different crops leaks into our waterways. And another big issue has been microplastics. So even if you're eating organic food, organic veggies, what does that come wrapped in? It comes wrapped in plastic, right? And so um, that's where I've been really fired up is how can we help people thrive in this modern toxic world? Because again, you're doing everything right. If you're doing everything right, you're still exposed to these things. And thankfully, God's built our bodies with these awesome mechanisms to handle that. But we still get overwhelmed. And, that's been a big change for me because I always thought if you just ate organic, you took care of the basics, you were going to be good to go 100%. And I think that's been a big shift for me is organic whole foods are not necessarily enough, which is very controversial for me. That's been a huge change from how I've viewed health and wellness my whole life. And I think um, finding ways to help your body support it against these toxins that we're exposed to is huge. So, a lot of these things like glyphosates and microplastics, they've only been around for the last 40, 50 years. Like it's brand new. Um, and so our bodies are kind of adapting in real time. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the health challenges, in America.
100%. I could not agree more. And it's one of the things, again, going back to the lady I was talking to at the wedding, a lot of people have this misconception that if you're going to supplement your nutrients, and that's what we're doing, where if you're, especially those folks that aren't eating organic, you're just going to the grocery store and you're buying whatever you can get for the best value. And I get it. I don't, I understand we're all on budgets, but just to understand that supplementation isn't just for enhancement. A lot of it is for protection and sustainability. And that's one of the things, again, my buddy Gus and I, Dr. Vickery, we talk about all the time. That's a huge part of his practice, is helping people gain protocols that help them just defend against the toxicity of our environment. And I say it all the time, it is amazing the blessing that we live in this time where you can get I think now I always quote the 10-cent calorie, but I think it's gotten to the point where now you can get a pretty, sustainable calorie for even less than 10 cents. You don't even have to chew it. You can just gum it out. And so we have all these modern marvels in this habitat we live in, but our bodies were built for survival, and all the things that we've done to try to make survival kind of put that on a shelf and just exist in ease has now come back to kind of haunt us. And I do think you need extra supplementation. You need a little something extra just to protect. I tell you, another person I've talked to this a couple of times is Ailey Cohen, who's been on my show, who wrote the book Non-Toxic, Living Healthy in a Toxic World. And then she just had her most recent book that came out is Detoxify. And I recommend that to anyone listening, just to get an understanding of what we're up against, not to freak people out, not to scare people, not to get you to try to just completely check out of the modern world and go try to find some untouched utopia.
Right.
You're not going to do that. But it's just to arm you with knowledge and understanding that, hey, we live in a wonderful modern world, but with it comes trade-offs. And so I think what you're talking about, supplementation to protect against those things, it's not just bro science anymore. It's not just, again, to get jacked and try to perform as a triathlete or a crush it at high rocks. No, it's just, we live in a world that if you want to thrive versus just kind of survive through it, you might need to do a little bit of supplementation.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, that's, it's one of the interesting things too, is it's funny how these niche communities, the biohackers or the bodybuilders with creatine, where what was niche 10, 15 years ago is now mainstream. And I'm always
Yep.
curious of like, what are those trends where, people are doing it now that is going to be, your grandma's going to be doing it in 10 years.
100%. And that's one of the things cool, like I talked about before we got on, and I'm just so the listener knows, I'm the president of the Access to Health Foundation, and I'm trying to introduce a lot of these, like what Dan said, the biohacking community's common knowledge. I'm trying to take that to those communities where folks are just trying to survive, where they're eating the worst of the worst things. They're using the emergency room as their primary care physician. I'm trying to introduce some of these cutting edge nutraceuticals and just modalities to those folks that have never thought about it. And here's the good news, Dan. And I've said this probably more this year, as you can imagine, than I've said almost anything else, is that regardless of whether people like Bobby Kennedy or not, we're having these conversations on a much broader scale than we did before. I think the whole Maha movement, it's taking the biohacking sphere out of the niche. Those of us who listen to Peter Attia's Drive podcast and love to geek out on him, breaking down some study with Lane Norton or something, to everyday people. And, so I was talking to a physician buddy of mine, and we were talking about some content that we wanted to cover on this show when he was about to come on. He said, he said, that's not who your listener is. We've got to make it easier to digest and all this stuff. I'm like, do you realize that Peter Attia's book Outlive just became a bestseller. And I can guarantee you it wasn't just the biohacking community reading it. No,
Yep.
this stuff is going mainstream. People are starting to understand the agency that they have for their health and the fact that what used to be just, I mean, dude, I remember the old companies when I was growing up, like Shackley and
Oh, yeah.
just these multi-level marketing shake companies and stuff. No, now it's people are like they're really open to functional medicine. What used to be holistic medicine and kind of woo woo is now like, no, I'm down. Tell me what I need. I can't tell you how many people ask me about a supplement or something. And to me, it's kind of encouraging. And so I'm glad to hear you say that because I see it too. I think there is a shift.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. I recently, my uncle started calling me. He's like, what do you?" He's like running this cholesterol panel through me, and he's like, "What do you think about ApoB and all this stuff?" And I was like, "This is awesome!" Like, you know,
Yeah.
that we're having this conversation. So, 5 years, 10 years ago, no chance.
So, of all the things that take me through the herb botanical, however, because I know that's what James, our mutual friend, he told me that that was kind of like what you were really interested in and kind of geeking out on. And Dan, I know absolutely freaking nothing unless one of my buddies tells me, hey, like whenever I had a couple of jaw surgeries last year and I was trying to heal quicker. And so another, again, a mutual friend of mine and James, guy named James Barry, who owns Pluck Seasoning. He introduced me to another guy who had like encapsulated some turmeric products and stuff for fast healing or whatever. So all natural. So tell me how you started chasing that and give us just let this audience know some really cool things herbally, botanically that they could use in their everyday protocols to, I don't know, you mentioned allergies earlier with with the y'all's product, but just anything that you think anyone listening to this might benefit from.
Yeah. So I've always had an interest in herbs, dad as well. So we kind of shared that passion. And a couple years ago, I had the opportunity to do a master's program in kind of herbal sciences, where we got to spend 2 years just digging deep into the world of herbs, and we call it phytochemistry. So phytochemicals are like the specific little, I guess, nutrients you could say in herbs that tend to have activity within the body. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of always been an interest of mine. And so yeah, with that, you kind of get open to the whole world of herbal medicine. And there's some fascinating stuff there. A lot of like medicine was herbs, like for most of human history till 100 years ago. If you're talking about medicine, you're talking about herbs. Um, and there's really some I guess cultural notions there where like a lot of people in the UK, they grow up with herbalists that are like very much part of their doctoral like doctoring system. Or in Asia, you see TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, again, very herbal based blends of tons of herbs, 10, 15, 20 herbs, or Ayurveda in India. So you kind of see these cool traditional systems. And America actually had a pretty interesting herbal system in the 1800s. And then through some interesting legislation in like around the 1907, something like that, there was kind of, it got cut off at the root. And so in America, we've kind of grown up without really having this rich herbal history that we could have had. Because again, it used to be kind of herbs were medicine. Um, but we're starting to see that come back where people are starting to be more interested in herbs and looking for a natural way. And so how I look at it, and really a lot of the folks I talk with is you start to experience health challenges. If you go on an RX, right, it's typically going to shut off a pathway or turn on a pathway, right? And that can be great because it's kind of just doing one precise thing. But the body is really complex where there's all sorts of different pathways that are working together. And so when we just do one on off switch, right, it doesn't always have the long term benefits that we want to have. And so the cool thing with herbs is a lot of times you have an herb that's working on 5, 10, 15 different pathways at the same time. So we call that the entourage effect, where you have all these different plant compounds. So I believe God has put those compounds in these different herbs, right? And then they all work together to impact the body. And it tends to be more of a gentler approach. and I would say more sustainable often over the long run. So that's kind of like an overview, I guess. But as far as interesting herbs, especially like business people, I like rhodiola. That's a great herb for kind of getting your brain going. I like to take that oftentimes. Another interesting one, and not really as much a herb, it's actually an amino acid, but it's L-theanine. So a lot of people will stack theanine with caffeine, with your morning coffee. And what that does is that has a stabilizing effect on that caffeine molecule. And so a lot of times it kind of evens out the jitters if you get a little too much caffeine and gives you more of a gentler slope of energy. So that's like a great stack that a lot of people have. And I would say an underutilized herb that a lot of people don't think about is actually ginger. It's the same family as turmeric, so turmeric kind of gets a lot of love in the kind of the inflammatory space, I guess you could say. But ginger has a lot of the same benefits, and works through kind of some more different pathways. So I'm always a fan of ginger. It's also really gentle on the stomach as well, whereas kind of other stuff can be a little bit harsher. Um, so yeah, those are kind of some favorites there. And then another one I'd throw out there is ashwagandha. I actually
Yeah.
grow it in my garden, which is kind of fun. Um, so ashwagandha it has a really strong smell. The roots are the part of the herb that is active that you use. And it comes from the Sanskrit word that means smell of a horse. And if you've ever had fresh ashwagandha root, it's like, whoa, it's
Yeah.
like intense. Uh,
Yeah.
but it kind of just has this nourishing, energizing effect on kind of the hormonal systems. So ashwagandha is another great one as well.
All right, so I'm going to ask a couple questions about those. Rhodiola, do you take like I drink tea with lion's mane and rhodiola. It's from a Ticino brand that I found at Drug Emporium.
Mhm.
Does it matter? Does the delivery method matter that much? Do you take it a capsule? Or if I drink it as tea, am I getting the same impact?
Yeah, that should be just fine. I
Okay.
typically take it in a capsule, but I've also done some liquid caps as well. I believe Gaia Herbs makes a great little liquid cap one.
Yep.
All good. Yeah.
Okay. So, what about? I know a lot of folks will incorporate herbs for sleep. So, what are some herbs? Like, if some folks are listening to this, and feel free. I know this is we don't do pay to play on the podcast. So, if you talk about your company and products you have, that is perfectly acceptable. So, if you have a product on some of these things I'm asking, then say, hey, yeah, you can go to Utzy and here's what we have, and this is what we can help you out with that. So sleep. Some people don't want to take melatonin. So what is what's something else they could take as an alternative?
Yeah. So sleep is a very challenging topic because it is very personalized to your body and kind of what's going on. So there's kind of a lot of different factors there. So I mentioned earlier that we looked at the sleep category and we actually ended up building out like 3 or 4 different products in the category because there's so many different issues. So some people's, reason they can't sleep is because their mind is racing. Some people is their body feels kind of energized. And so there's kind of all these different mechanisms. And so we built out a couple different products. So one is called Fall Asleep, which is, for folks that have trouble getting that initial falling asleep at night. And then we have another product called Stay Asleep, which is kind of more of a calming one for your body to help you stay asleep throughout the night. And, a couple of key herbs I would point out there is I really like American skullcap. Scutellaria latiflora is the herbal name. But it's a traditional American herb, and they call it a nervine. And it basically has these relaxing properties for your body and your mind. So that's one I really like. We also grow, actually, we grow this on the farm. It's called passion flower. It's a beautiful flower. And, anyways, but on the herbal standpoint, it works really well as a sedative where it helps to relax your body and help you fall asleep. So we've got a couple of different herbal products there. Again, it's hard to have one comprehensive sleep formula. So that's why we've kind of broken up into a stay asleep, a fall asleep. We also do have a melatonin, but it's a microdose melatonin because a lot of people find you take 5, 10 milligrams, you see some really high doses out there. And it gets you sleep for one night and then it just messes up your circadian rhythm. So we've got a small amount that just kind of gives you a gentle nudge in that direction.
So here's what I love about what you just told me, and it makes so much sense that you have the different products for the different strategies. So like Are you wearing an Aura ring? Did I see that? Or do you have an Aura ring on?
I am
You wearable?
wearable free right now. Yeah.
Okay, which is probably good. I am an Aura guy,
Nice.
and I think Whoop is overkill, but I like to measure my sleep,
Yep.
and so let's take sleep for a minute for those Aura uh wearers out there. Seems to me that'd be pretty cool because there's a difference between like my latency will be pretty good, but my deep sleep and my REM sleep will kind of go to crap quite a bit. So I'm thinking that if my latency was a problem, I could take the fall asleep.
Yep.
If my deep sleep was, which mine averages about 9 to 10 minutes a night versus the, 90 minutes I'd love to have, then the stay asleep might be something that could kind of keep me in a deeper state of sleep. So I'm going to try those. That's a good idea. I like
Yeah.
that. And melatonin to me, it's just I don't want to get hooked on it into. I feel like I'll be groggy if I take So I don't know. So I'd like to try some of that.
I'll send you some. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and the melatonin too, I agree with you, and sometimes, like, the gentle nudge, like, you're slightly off or there's hours changing or,
Hmm.
daylight savings craziness, like, you can kinda use some of those gentle things, but, yeah, I don't think we should be crashing the circadian rhythm, I think it's gotta be gentle.
100%. Now, here's one that has received a lot of attention. It's even been dubbed the poor man's Ozempic, berberine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, fan of berberine, huge fan of berberine. Um, we've had we've had berberine products within kind of the different lineups for quite a long time. But yeah, I love berberine. Typically, you can find that in a couple different plant forms actually. So we built out a product called Triberine where it uses the phytochemical purified form of berberine, which is usually called berberine hydrochloride, but also alongside plant forms as well. So there's a Indian barberry. Let's see, there's also a couple of plants in the US, like Oregon grapefruit. And typically it's these plants that have these bright yellow roots. And that's where you find the berberine. And if you've ever seen purified berberine, it is this bright golden, yellowy, orange color, and it tastes terrible. Super
Mm-hmm.
bitter. Um, but that's where you kinda get these benefits where it helps to stabilize blood sugar. But yeah, we built out a product where it has the purified form along with, the whole form herb, where you kinda get these different phytochemicals that are typically you see in a plant that is you're not gonna get if you just have the purified form. And where I talked earlier about the entourage effect, where it's like again, I believe God built these plants with all these different phytochemicals in them, and they all work in concert together. So let's get all those working together, and I think you can see kind of a longer, more sustained benefit there.
Terrific. Now, I have to ask because obviously, like I said, you kind of live in a health and wellness junkie like me paradise. So, what is your day? And you're also an entrepreneur, and you come from an entrepreneurial background with your family and everything. I love to understand, tips, tactics that make you stay sustainable. 5 girls, I'm so jealous. I've got 2. You're at the other end of the game, and a lot of parents like where I am, mine are 24 and 25, my 2 girls. And so there's light at the end of the tunnel. My oldest is about to get married. So I'm going
Oh,
through the
wow.
wedding phase. So God bless you, brother. Thank goodness you have a thriving company. Five weddings. Oh, wow. Because this one, I may be asking you for a job, in a couple months, but we're just trying to get through this first one. But raising 5 children, being a devoted husband, and keeping all of that in its proper given it its proper priority, but also maintaining a solid business. How do you do it? Everything from what's your day look like? How do you plan your day? Do you read things? Is your father, I'm sure, has mentored you, but do you look for virtual mentors? Kind of, what is the ecosystem of Dan Powers that keeps you grounded, focused, and also successful?
Yeah. Well, at first, I'd say it's all by God's grace. So that's number one. But I would say, I've had an incredible example with my dad. He faithful man. He's pastored pretty much most of my life while running successful companies and having all sorts of different things going on, a million projects. And so I've been able just to see his example. And so he was always an early riser. And so I've followed that example. So I'm up at 4:30 every morning, work out with a group of guys every morning from 5 to 6, back home, and then it's coffee, Bible time. And then if I can fit it, I've been reading through different classic great books. So that's been
Me too. What are you reading? I got to ask me. I'm doing the same thing.
Oh, okay. So I've been reading Plato. So we're going to do 9 months study on Plato. So
Okay.
oh gosh, we just finished Alcibiades one, which is
Okay.
the classic know thyself.
Mhm. Yep.
And then we just started Euthyphro. I forget how to say that. It's kind of a funky word, but and that's kind of the classic piety. What is piety? And so that's what I study kind of in my free time, and I really enjoy that.
Okay, very cool. And then like whenever like so that's more of a philosophical take, which I as well. I love reading John Stuart Mills and a lot of Aristotle, and don't agree with some of the stuff that I read, but it's always good to see where the thought leaders, a lot of Stoic philosophy, Seneca and the like, Marcus Aurelius. So what about like any other novels, nonfiction, anything like that you consume?
Well, I did not read, for a couple years because 'cause we've just had babies, and that's when I said
Understandable.
I don't have a wearable is because I had to stop because I was getting up 3 times a night, and, I'm only up maybe once a night now. Um,
Wow.
but, as far as, other books, I'm always like Outlive, you mentioned by Tia, that was a huge book, that was impactful when I read that probably 2 summers ago, and
Mhm.
like, he has this one graph of health span versus lifespan, and, like, that is just seared into my brain at any
Same.
given time, and, I'm 32, so I'm healthy, I'm vibrant, and all these different types of things, but, like, I'm already trying to think of how can I extend that health span aspect, and so even the other day, I was, like, texting what I do is, like, I work out with my buddies in the morning, and that's just, like, you will go to the track, we do beach workouts, all sorts of stuff. And I was like, oh, there's a VO2 max study where you can study like you can you can do sprints like these Norwegian runners. They have this
Yeah.
4x4 method and it increases
Yes.
your VO2 max greater than anything. And VO2 max is one of the best longevity predictors. So I'm like, I need to start doing this. So this is kind of, where I get off and go crazy, with kind of researching this type of stuff. But yeah, I read a lot of health and business type of stuff. But I've really just started to find the space to get back into reading kind of like I would just say books that are not of the moment, but that are kind of timeless. And I think there's a value in that. So it's like, for me, it's like trying to get less news, less Twitter, and more like, ancient thoughts that people have been working through for 1,000 years. I'm like, that's what I need more of.
So some recommendations as you go down that road, of course, with five little girls, it's gonna be a challenge, but we've got time. And just before I even talk about how I choose my books now, I read Jim Quick's book Limitless and wanted to try to read a book a week for a while.
Mhm.
And man, what I did was make myself miserable. I became so obsessed with the speed of my reading and getting them knocked out. I wasn't really savoring and enjoying them. So now I've kind of backed off of that. I read every single morning. And what I've done is I've gone to the Russian authors, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. And the reason I love the Russian authors is because what you described, they will put in a fictional novel the times, and then especially Dostoevsky will examine like human nature, spiritual components through the characters, kind of show like in Crime and Punishment, showing the internal structure of how good people pushed to the right circumstance will do horribly evil things, but then grappling with it and the relief of being honest and coming clean and just confessing, who you are, all these different themes that come through. And I'm like you, man. I instead of trying to stay in, now I will read some stuff just tactically for business or like Outlive or something to that effect. But going back to those classic authors who were weaving philosophy into those stories, I've really found a lot of satisfaction in that. And in fact, last year my kick was getting through all the Dickens novels,
Nice.
and because Dickens did the same thing. It was pretty much a look at industrialization of England, in particular London, and kind of the classes, how they were separating. And so it's kind of fun. And again, as a fellow Christian, looking for those themes, like I didn't realize that there was such a strong Christian influence in Russia. I did not know that until I started reading Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. I had no idea. So anyway, so it's cool. I
Those
it's
are,
fun.
by the way, Jason, those are on my short list. Like,
Yeah.
kind of my thing is like Dostoevsky is like the next kind of thing to dig into. So I've been trying to strategize if I can get like some sort of Christmas break or something, and then just get a couple books and see if I can hammer them out.
Yeah.
It's yeah,
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do a follow up. I want to see what you thought of them. I'm about to finish up Anna Karenina right now, and
okay,
I've really enjoyed it, and it's made me, and it's kind of timely with what's going on in Russia and everything, to understand just Russian history and why they're so devoted to the motherland and kind of their cultural thinking. It's really fascinating. I'm enjoying it. Okay, so and then one more thing I want to touch on too that you mentioned is the 4x4 Norwegian, dude. I don't care what modality you use. I don't care if it's on a bike. I don't care if it's running. It is just a beat down, but it's so efficient. It's so good. And so you'll appreciate this. I was at dinner with a buddy of mine, and he was like, "Oh, you're a zone two guy, aren't you? You're a zone two guy." And I'm like, well, I'm a zone two guy 80% of the time. And the other 20%, I'm a zone five guy because I'm building my pyramid. You just start quoting Peter Attia and say,
excellent.
this is my strategy for enhancing my VO2 max, especially as I get older. And it's like, those little things that you grab onto, man. And another thing too, that I'm right there with Atia. I am training for life. I'm not training for the next high rocks. I'm not training for a Spartan race. I'm not a triathlete. I'm 50 years old too. I'm not going to do those things. My body doesn't need the wear and tear. I'm training for life, so that graph that you're talking about, I want it to be above that 50% as long as possible. And then boom, just drop dead. Well, I mean,
Ex-
one day I was playing with the great grandkids. The next day, Grandpa Jason's out. You
Yes,
know?
exactly.
So
Yep.
yeah. So all right. So that covers the reading. What else do you do? Like, what is your day like? Your work day? How do you prioritize that? Because like, God, that's a lot of responsibility, dealing with employees, everything. How are you managing that?
Yeah, that's, been another thing again, I've kind of been able to lean on my dad as far as, like, how do I I'll run into a managerial kind of situation, and so it's like, "Hey, how would you do in this situation? What do you recommend?" And so, I feel like I feel like I kinda just have this safety net in a sense where I just get access to some really wise, advice and counsel, and it's cool too where I also have other people in my life that'll, they're, um, they've been in the corporate world for like 40, 50 years, and they've seen a little bit of everything, and I just love picking their brain of like, "Hey, you know, how do you view life and work?" And because 'cause they're retired, they're on the other side of it, and I love to kinda understand that as well, that backward thinking perspective. And so, yeah, that's kinda been a lot of it. But, yeah, I feel like my days at Utzy it's just kinda crazy. It's like, get in and, "Okay, what's going on today?" And so, we're still very much in kind of that, a little bit of that startup mode where every day is like a new challenge, and I'm in a little bit of everything. And so, I really do like that because there's always a challenge to tackle.
What is something that right now, due to the normal rigors of life, is there anything that you wish you had time to do that you're not able to? And what is it and why?
Oh, goodness. The 2 things that come to my mind was Read the Russians,
Mhm.
inspired by you. Uh, but that's something I've been thinking about. But the other thing, this is maybe it should be something else, I don't know, but I really wanna do jujitsu. I've done a couple classes, and I really like it. The risk reward is honestly probably not great, but I just kinda like it is very appealing to me. It does not fit into my schedule, and that's why I've held off, because it is very much not conducive with family time. So, um, I might be able to sneak into, like, a 5, 6 AM class at some point, and work that into the schedule, and my whole thing is, like, if it inconveniences me, that's fine. If it inconveniences the family, not gonna happen. So, if I have to get up early, that's on me. I'm happy to do that, but I can't take away family time. So, I'm interested, but I don't know if it's going to happen for a while here.
It's funny you mentioned that. I just had this conversation with we have a retail children's boutique here in Tyler that's all my wife. She built it. She runs it. It's 14 years old. She's amazing. And so I was in there the other day talking to one of the moms, and her husband has started doing jujitsu. We had this conversation. I said the exact same thing that you just said. I have also wanted to do it. I have a nephew that just got his, I think he might have got his black belt. I mean,
Wow.
he's like, really, he started really young, real proud of him. And so I watched him. And then, of course, I told her, I was like, that's what especially in the kind of the space that you and I stay in, all the cool kids are doing jujitsu. Yeah, that's it. I could take Taekwondo, or one of my closest friends, he's a Sifu for Kung Fu, which is cool. But if I'm going to do martial arts, I got to do jujitsu. That's what all the cool kids do. But then, man, right here in my neighborhood, this guy that, he looks like Superman. I mean, he is just ripped, CrossFit. He's closer to your age. He's probably a little older than you. He's younger than me, and was doing jujitsu, jacked up his neck, and like couldn't do anything for a while. I think he had like one of those big braces, and I'm like,
Uh-oh.
that's what would happen to me. That's what would happen to me. And so, but I do think jujitsu is one of those things. I think a lot of guys like you and I are going through that kind of internal battle of, man, it would be cool. There is the time, but then there's also that, man, if I jack myself up. So wise on your part. But also, kind of as a throwaway line in there, I love what you just said. So I do a Bible study with my oldest daughter every Monday afternoon. She lives in Dallas now. She's moved from Atlanta. She's the one getting married. And so now it's shifted to kind of like devotional slash premarital counseling with dad.
Awesome.
And we were talking about being humble and seeing the other person as is more significant than you or whatever. Basically put the other person first. And I'm gonna bring that up to her. I love what you said about it's okay to inconvenience yourself, but not to inconvenience the family. The families, your wife and 5 daughters should not have to bend to your selfish desires. Now, if it has to do with you have to take a trip and they want to do something else for the sake of the business and how you put food on the table, whatever, you can make your priorities. I get that
Yeah.
for the listener that's out there being the contrarian. But when it comes to jujitsu or doing, your next high rocks or whatever, I think that's just sound advice. If it inconveniences you, that's one thing. If it inconveniences the family, yeah, it's a no-go. Very good standard to maintain.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things. Again, I've seen it modeled, and so it's like that's what I want to do, and got to protect the family time. So especially with all the littles, so otherwise it gets too crazy.
Yeah. And I would say, and for that young father out there, Dan, that says, I just can't do that. I have to be at the dinner with the business dinner. I have to take the extra trip. I have to stay the extra hours. As someone who, and again, you're still early in your career, you got a lot of runway, but you seem to be dialed in. What would you tell that young father trying to balance it all, career, family, but loves the Lord and wants to maintain that discipline? What advice would you give to that young father that says, I feel like I'm failing and I can't get it right?
Yeah. Well, I think we've got to look at life as being seasons, right? And so there's different times and different seasons. And so there's sometimes there's seasons of putting in 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, right? Of you got to get it going. There's a opportunity and you've got to act. But that can't be all the time. And so I think, for my wife and I, like in our local church, we want to do ministry there, right? Because we want to help and serve because we've been blessed. But it's like we don't have the capacity to do a whole lot right now. And so for us, we're kind of frustrated at that because we can't do as much as we'd like. But we're like, this is a season. We've got all these little kiddos right now, and they're not always going to be little. And so, um, right now, whatever we can, let's do that. But just recognize that this is just the season of life that we're in, and that's not going to be forever. So that's how I look at really everything, whether it's work projects. We've been doing a big launch I've been working on. So long hours for me. And it's like, it's a season. It's going to be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And then let's back off the gas a little bit and get back in balance. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I love it, man. Dan, dude, we have just chewed up an hour like it was nothing. Told you this would be easy.
That's awesome.
So before I let you go, though, I always like to ask all my guests if there's anything that I don't want you to leave here going, man, I wish you would have asked about this. I wish I could have said this about either Ortho, my dad, my wife, my kids, Utzy. Is there anything else that this audience that you would like them before we depart that they know about you, your business, or anything like that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. And I think one of the things that I've been spending a lot of time on is we just launched what we believe to be the world's first microplastics detox product. And so we see this as kind of like microplastics are the issue of our time. They're in everything. And we are just continually being exposed. And, a lot of the original research was just on environmental of how it impacted the cuttlefish or X, Y, and Z, which is, cool to understand. But really, it's only been the last couple of years that researchers have been looking at health impacts, and we're seeing that they're showing up in the brain, in the lungs, all throughout the body, the reproductive system, and these microplastics we consume them and they stay in the body, which is just really kind of terrifying, and it's theorized that that's leading to a lot of kind of just overall lack of vitality, low grade inflammation, brain fog, gut dysfunction, and these different things. And so, um, I read some of the original research that came out in Nature journal last year. And so I was like, we've got to figure out something to help impact this because we're kind of swimming in a toxic soup. And so we've spent the last year building a product to help out with microplastics. And so kind of the way I look at it is there's circulating microplastics and embedded microplastics. Embedded microplastics are those particles that your body has already built into tissue, like your muscle tissue or fat. It's been stored in your body because you've been exposed to so much that your body can't get rid of all of it. It gets embedded. And right now, science doesn't know how to get rid of that, which is kind of scary. And so it's theorized that just healthy living, exercise, sweating, eventually a cellular turnover, you'll kind of kick out the embedded microplastics. But circulating microplastics are things that you consumed, like if you drink out of like never do this, but if you drink out of like a plastic water bottle that's been sitting in your car all day, don't do that. But if you did do that, that those microplastics are now in your system, and your body, God has designed it with a filtering system where it detoxifies these different things. But what happens is we get so overwhelmed with the sheer amount of exposure that that it gets overwhelmed, and then those end up getting stored. So I talked with researchers all over the world, and we built out a product that was essentially supports the detox pathways specific to these plastics and how your body can kick them out. So that's been a huge project on our end of just, again, trying to understand the literature, digging in, seeing what exists out there. And then again, talking with suppliers and researchers all over the world to build it. So we just launched that actually in this week, actually like the other day. So it's been a little wild over here, but we're very excited again to be kind of one of the first people to tackle the issue of microplastics and helping people have agency in their life. That it's not just like I'm exposed, it's terrible, and nothing to do. It's like, well, we can do some things, and the body, God has designed the body to do certain things to detoxify, and here's some ways that we can support that when we get overwhelmed.
I love that. I'm gonna definitely check that out because it is one of the things that kind of freaks me out now, drinking out of plastic bottles and stuff. And I used to just, even when I was healthy, disregard like I'm fine. No, it's a problem, and I won't touch a hot plastic bottle anymore. No way. Like my wife will leave some sitting in the car that she hasn't opened. I'm like, yep. No, 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 no. We're not drinking out of those. So good deal. I'll definitely check that out. How do people find you, your products? I'll obviously link to the website, but anything else as far as socials or anything that people can stay in touch with you?
Yeah. With the brand, it's just Utzy.com, UTZY. And we've got same thing for social media. So yeah, you can check it out, follow along. And people ever want to email me, I'll put my email out there. You just email me at Daniel@Utzy.com. We're real simple.
Awesome. Well, Dan, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much. I believe that your first podcast, beginning of a friendship, anything we can do to support you over here, brother, I'm here for it. Okay.
I appreciate it, Jason.